Welcome to another First Five. Today we find ourselves in 1 Samuel chapter 26. And we find a story of David as he's been chased down by Saul and he's running away from him, and Saul has become his enemy. King Saul does not like David purely because David is a threat to Saul's throne. And so with this context, we find this story of David and Saul and a specific interaction. So at the beginning of 1 Samuel chapter 26, it says this: The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jessamine?" So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 chosen men of Israel to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jessamine. But David stayed in the desert. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with an army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down into the camp with me to Saul?" "I'll go with you," said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of my spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him. Either his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head and let's go." So David took the spear and water jug near Saul's head and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. The story goes on to then there being an interaction between Saul and David, where David shows him the spear and the water jug that he had taken, which then brings this nice moment of Saul realizing the grace that David showed him by not killing him, because he knows that he could have killed him because he has proof. He was right there next to him. It's like if someone came into your house and they took the lamp off your nightstand, it was like, "Look, I could have done," so that's like the same situation in which he's like, "Oh man, David was right there. And he chose to be peaceful and treat me with love and respect instead of this other way of living, which would have been to kill him." But if you read much of the story in 1 Samuel and the interactions that have so far been between David and Saul, you would see that Saul has done enough to warrant David to kill him. Saul probably deserves this. David would have been allowed to. Many people would have agreed with his friend and said, "No, that would have been the right thing to do. That would have been protecting you. That would have been the right thing. It would have gotten this evil king out of the throne." But David instead chooses to do something else. And pretty much what he says is, "I have the right to kill Saul, but that does not make it the right thing." And a lot of times I think we need to live more like David in this way. Just because we have the right to do something, does that make it the right thing to do? In many cases, it doesn't. And just like in this situation where David has the right to kill Saul, he knows the right thing to do is to treat him with love and respect, which is not necessarily what Saul deserves, at least not by human standards. But David knows that living for God, he's to do the right thing. And he's got to love Saul. It's not his job to make sure that justice happens. That is the job of God. And that's what he says there. Whether he will die when his time comes or he will go down in battle, some point, God will take care of this and God will perform the justice. So, I ask you this. Just because you have the right to do it, does that make it the right thing to do? I think we need to be asking ourselves this question more often. And I hope that this question proves helpful and proves to help you live more like Jesus and live more like God calls us to live. I hope this is helpful, and we'll see you later for another First Five.